Welcome back to The Survival Historian, the channel where we unearth the extraordinary knowledge embedded in humanity's past, knowledge that shaped survival, resilience, and mastery over the harshest environments on Earth. Today we're venturing deep into the verdant darkness of the Amazon, where the very air itself seems conspired against permanence. The jungle is relentless. Humidity drips from every leaf. Fungi bloom in the shadows. Insects tunnel through wood like it's sand. Rot is the jungle's law. Yet centuries ago, indigenous Amazonian tribes constructed dwellings, shelters that would stand for generations, built entirely from wood, without a single drop of modern chemical preservative. How? That's the question that drew us here, and what we've uncovered challenges everything the modern world believes about construction and sustainability. Prepare yourself for a journey into the botanical alchemy of survival, where ancient wisdom reveals solutions we're only now beginning to understand. You see, the first and most critical secret wasn't really about what the indigenous peoples applied to their wood. Oh no, it was about knowing which wood to choose in the first place. While Western industrial approaches often assumed all timber was essentially the same, a blank canvas requiring chemical fortification, Amazonian tribes possessed something far more valuable: generations of accumulated ethnobotanical knowledge. They understood their forest intimately, didn't they? They recognized that different tree species possessed inherent chemical defenses against the very forces that threatened human structures. Now, deep within the Yanomami territories and across the vast networks of Amazonian settlements, specific timber species were prized not for their workability alone, but for their internal chemistry. Manilkara huberi, known locally as Masaranduba, contains dense concentrations of natural compounds, particularly tannins and phenolic substances, that create an inhospitable environment for the fungi and insects that drive decay. These weren't random choices. These were selections made through centuries of observation, trial, and ecological understanding that actually predates the scientific method we now credit with discovering such properties. Selecting durable timber was only half the equation. The second revelation comes from understanding the processing methods these tribes employed, techniques that enhanced and unlocked the wood's natural preservative properties. These weren't simple applications, they were sophisticated interventions, born from deep environmental knowledge and refined through cultural practice. The Yaguar peoples, among others, pioneered smoke curing, a deceptively elegant technique that fundamentally transformed wood's resistance to decay. By exposing wooden structural components to low-intensity smoke over extended periods, they achieved multiple objectives simultaneously. Another technique, equally sophisticated in its simplicity, involved water soaking. Bamboo and certain wooden components were submerged in water for weeks, sometimes even months. This process leached out soluble starches and sugars, compounds that insects and fungi find, well, pretty much irresistible. Perhaps most revelatory is the application of natural oils and resins extracted from the rainforest itself. Carapaguayensis seeds yield an oil that indigenous peoples use for both medicinal and protective purposes. Proteum species provided resins traditionally used to caulk canoes and seal structures. Yet the tribes understood something else, something that modern construction often overlooks. Preservation wasn't solely a chemistry problem, it was an architectural one. the design and positioning of structures played an equally vital role in their longevity. Elevated foundations, one of the most consistent design elements across Amazonian dwellings, served multiple functions. They prevented water pooling and direct ground contact, which would have introduced moisture and soil-borne decay organisms directly into the wood. The specific joinery techniques employed, the ways in which wooden components connected to one another, reflected a sophisticated understanding of stress distribution and moisture management. Unlike many colonial constructions that relied on metal fasteners, which accelerated rust and wood splitting, Amazonian builders employed methods that allowed slight movement and wood expansion without creating stress fractures that would admit moisture and decay. What's particularly striking is how these architectural decisions were often intertwined with cultural ritual and spiritual practice. The construction process itself, with its ceremonies, its timing, its respect for the forest being harvested, formed part of a holistic approach to building that integrated practical, ecological, and spiritual dimensions. Somewhere in the transition to modernity, this sophisticated knowledge was buried beneath the promise of chemistry and the efficiency of industrial solutions. The colonial period and subsequent centuries of Western dominance systematically devalued indigenous expertise, replacing it with chemical preservatives, arsenic, creosote, and other toxins that promised permanence at the cost of ecological devastation. Today, as environmental awareness finally penetrates industrial consciousness, we're beginning to rediscover what was never actually lost, just deliberately forgotten. A structure preserved not through toxins, but through knowledge. It's really a system that enhances rather than degrades the ecosystem. Modern researchers working in ethnobotany and sustainable architecture are, beginning to validate and codify these ancient practices. The story of Amazonian wood preservation is ultimately a story about humility and foresight. It reminds us that the most sophisticated solutions are often those that work with natural systems rather than against them. It demonstrates that resilience built through understanding is honestly superior to resilience imposed through toxins. The structures these tribes built didn't just resist rot, they existed in harmony with their environment, taking from the forest while returning nothing harmful. As we stand at a crossroads where sustainability has, shifted from ideology to necessity, we possess an extraordinary opportunity. We can move beyond the false choice between chemical preservation and inevitable decay. We can embrace methods that have proven themselves across centuries, refined by peoples whose survival depended on correctness. This is the survival historian's core mission, to demonstrate that the past isn't merely prologue, it's teacher, guide, and resource. Those who survived the longest did so, not through force or luck, but through understanding. The Amazonian tribes understood their environment so completely that they could work with it rather than against it. That understanding didn't die with colonization. It persists in the forest, in academic research, and in the growing movement toward truly sustainable practice. If you found this exploration of ancient preservation techniques as compelling as we did, please like this video and subscribe to The Survival Historian. Share this with architects, engineers, and anyone passionate about building a sustainable future. Our next episode explores how nomadic peoples preserved food across millennia using techniques that rival modern refrigeration. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the greatest innovations often come not from laboratories, but from generations of observation, respect, and integration with the living world around us.